Good afternoon. Today I'm going to be processing some fresh pumpkins into a puree, and then once you have a puree you can freeze it, which is the most recommended way of preserving pumpkin, and it is very simple to do. The only thing with frozen pumpkin is when you thaw it out it will be extra watery, so you will want to drain the extra water off before you use it in a recipe. The other way I like to preserve my pumpkin is by canning it. The traditional way of canning pumpkin is to cut it up into chunks and then you remove the skin. You do all of this by hand. Then you would pack it into your canning jars, add some boiling water over it and a little bit of salt, and then you pressure can it. And the pressure canning must be done because it is a non-acidic food. If you water bath can it, it will not be safe to eat and you can get botulism. So it must be pressure canned. And you can do quarts or pints depending on your recipe. The way I choose to do it, which is not the most recommended way, but I know a lot of people do it this way, is to pressure can the puree, not just the chunks. And I will open a can that I did, if you can see that, in 2012, so this was 5 years ago. And I'll go ahead and open it now. So on the outside of the jar it looks nice, pretty orange. It looks really good. On top it's a little dark. This is very normal for all foods that have sat in canning jars for a while. So if you're really nervous about the color, mind you, this was still perfectly sealed. Okay, there's no signs of spoilage. It's just the top had a little bit of air on it and it's a little discolored, which happens to a lot of home canned foods over time. You can just gently scrape that top little layer off and dispose of it if you want. But down here looks really good, just like you would buy in the grocery store. And I grew my pumpkins, so all I paid for was the seeds. You can also buy pumpkins very late in the season, right before Halloween or even the day after, for almost nothing. So just a few cents a pound. So this is how I'm going to do my pumpkins. As you can see here, I cut a good sized pumpkin. This is half of it, and then right here I already scraped the seeds out and I cut this into quarters. And I just use a cookie sheet and I put foil on it to make it very easy to clean up. And I lay it on there. So with this other half I'm going to just take a big spoon and remove the seeds. And I'm not going to throw these seeds away, I'm going to save them for roasting. I have quite a few pumpkins to do, so I'm going to save these for a couple days, actually in the refrigerator. They need to keep cold so they don't spoil. I'm not worried about rinsing them off right now for the sake of this video. Okay, so that only took a second to clean the seed cavity out. And then with this piece, you can cook it. It doesn't matter if it's right side up, upside down, doesn't really matter. I prefer to have them this way so I can see the cut side up, so that when I peek at them in about an hour, I can see if they look done or not. You can also test it with a fork. So what I will do is, I don't salt them or anything. I put them in a 350-degree oven for an hour to an hour and a half. And you can always test them with a fork in the meat of the pumpkin and see if it's nice and soft. Okay? When it's done, now these I just took out a few minutes ago. They're still very, very warm. You can see it's a little bit stringy. This is not a pie pumpkin. It's just a regular old jack-o'-lantern type pumpkin. It is very, very soft. And the strings are actually really easy to remove. It's not that big of a deal. These are still very warm. I just kind of take and peel this off gently with a spoon and my fingers, and I'll dispose of that. It's just a texture thing. Okay, once I get it to where I'm happy with that, I will just take a large spoon and go in there, and it's a little bit stringy on top. Don't worry about that. It purees beautifully. And I just go ahead and scrape the meat away from the skin. It's very soft. This was in here. It's a good sized pumpkin. These were in here there for about an hour and a half. Okay. When I am done with this, the only thing that will be left to go in the garbage will be the skins. Everything else will be preserved. So then I will take the meat of my pumpkin, and I will actually put it in a blender or a food processor, fill it up fairly full, and then I actually add a little bit of water so that it mixes better. And then after a minute or so in the blender, I will get a beautiful puree. And here's some I did last night. And you can see the water is starting to separate. That's just fine. This is my pumpkin puree. At this point, I can choose to put it in quart-sized freezer bags, and I mark them. And I actually measure this because most of my recipes call for 2 cups of pumpkin. So I will measure 2 cups of pumpkin into each freezer bag, and I will write that on there, exactly how much. And if you have recipes that call for a different amount and you use them often enough, you can measure the amount you need in each bag and mark it as such. And then go ahead and put it in the freezer. That is the preferred method of preserving pumpkin. But I also like to can it, and I don't have very much freezer space left. So I actually can quite a bit of it now, and I almost never buy it in the store. And then I will put my pumpkin puree in my canning jars, and I leave about 1 inch headspace. I fill it to the bottom ring of your canning jar. You don't need to add anything else. And then you wipe the rims, put your lid on, and then process it in a water bath canner, pressure canner. And there's no information in a good canning book on pressure canning the puree. So I just looked up applesauce. Applesauce, it says to process 20 minutes. So because pumpkin is more dense, I add on 10 minutes to that. So I will process for at least 30. Then, depending on your altitude, you're going to have to add additional time. So where I live, I have to add 10 more minutes. So my pint jars of pumpkin puree will be processed in a pressure canner for 40 minutes, just to be safe. And as you can see, it'll store for several years just fine. And always make sure that your lids have sealed properly, and that it smells good when you open it, and there's no visible signs of spoilage of any kind before you use it. And that is how I preserve my pumpkin every year. And be sure and check back with me in another day or so. I will do a video on roasting fresh pumpkin seeds. And thanks for watching. Bye.